2025 was jam-packed with a ton of excellent movies, none of which will be appearing in this video. Because before we can truly appreciate the cinematic blessings the year gave us, we must first look back on the ones that made us wish for the death of movies altogether. Truth be told, I didn't go too out of my way this year to watch movies I knew I wasn't going to like. My time grows less and less available, and frankly, I'm not trying to waste it. That being said, there are some truly bad films I was subjected to, and I would like to share my suffering with you. And remember, if you see a movie on here you enjoyed, please remember that my opinion is not objective and I am the be-all end-all authority on what's good and what's not. But seriously, don't hate me for what I'm about to say. Rather, try to win me over in the comments. I am more than open to being shown the light. First up, some dishonorable mentions, films that weren't great, but not bad enough to make it into the top 10. There's Honey Don't, a severely disappointing crime comedy from Ethan Coen, whose unsatisfying and half-baked story frustrated me beyond belief. The Map That Leads to You, a film I'm not entirely sure why I watched, but I actually liked the first act. It all goes basic and textbook after that, but hey, points for almost getting me. The Alto Nights, a film where it really felt like nothing happened, though it did give me a good few laughs. Also, look at this dude's neck. I was mesmerized the entire film. And finally, The Gorge, a cross between a young adult meet cute and an action horror movie that never really clicked for me, especially when you find out what's inside the titular gorge, coming out to be ugly to look at and shockingly bland to experience. Alright, time for the main course, the movies I disliked the most this year, starting with number 10.
I'm having a heart attack!
Romance isn't dead, but man, the conventional slasher genre just might be. Hard Eyes goes the route of Black Christmas and Thanksgiving by centering a slasher around Valentine's Day, but I honestly didn't find much to fall in love with here. It's about as basic and predictable as you'd probably come to expect, only occasionally saving itself with a gruesome death or a one-off funny line. A big issue I had with this was the leads, not in their performances or chemistry, but in how generic the story crafts their union. It's essentially a Hallmark movie with a little more teeth, which plays out exactly like you'd expect it to, with little subversion or at least strong enough comedy to keep this thing afloat. I think there was potential to lean into a more anti-Valentine's Day side of it all, focusing on two people who hate each other who are mistaken for a couple by a deranged killer. You know, something that makes this feel a little unique. It's not terrible, but I honestly enjoyed Clown in a Cornfield better, and that name sounds like it was generated by AI. But now we wait and see what holiday will get the slasher treatment next. You turn Labor Day into a horror movie and I will be genuinely impressed.
Today, Junior?
Everybody is trying to be the next Coen brothers, even Ethan Coen. But not everyone exactly gets what makes a modern Western thrilling and compelling. Having a little white kid believe he's the reincarnation of Sitting Bull isn't it, but I'll be honest, that at least grabbed my attention. Unfortunately, that's about all the uniqueness Americana brings to the table. The whole thing is slow, bland, and by the numbers, which kept me from ever really engaging with these characters as people rather than stock character archetypes. Each character is given a quirk, and then the script just calls it a day on actually fleshing them out and making them interesting or worthwhile to follow. Perhaps having a brain-damaged Paul Walter Hauser and an over-exaggerated, stuttering Sydney Sweeney weren't the best picks to drive this tale. And the story acts like it's this grounded, salt-of-the-earth story, but every word spoken feels like it's parroting the genre rather than trying to find a home in it. It even finds a way to make a big, climactic shootout that brings all the intertwining stories to convergence boring, having never really given you a thing to care about by the time bullets start to fly. It's not offensively bad, but it lacks the grit and flair needed to spice up that dry desert.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
I'm gonna be honest, I mostly watched this next movie because it sounded eerily similar to a script I wrote back in 2018 that's floated around the festival circuit, and I wanted to see if I was about to have my heart crushed. I'm happy to report my heart is still very much intact. The Woman in the Yard, one of several Blumhouse missteps, annoyed the hell out of me with how slow and uninteresting it managed to be, following a cast of poorly written and unappealing main characters. It never really lands on its haunting visuals, relying on cheap, loud noises to catch you off guard without really unnerving you. And while it looks mostly okay, it commits this specific trend of shallow focus constantly that just makes it and other movies like it an eyesore. Around the third act, my interest started to peak, but like the preceding 2 acts, it meanders and drags its feet to get where it's going, and where it's going isn't all that pleasant. I'm not super sure what it was trying to get across aside from grief is the real horror, which we've seen 100 times at this point. I'd almost respect some of the bolder choices at the end if they were handled with even the tiniest bit of nuance or maturity. It really had the chance to be ballsy, but with Blumhouse, most of the time it's just straight balls.
This guy's a gangster? His real name's Clarence.
You know, I actually kind of liked most of the crop of superhero films we got this year, but the worst one has gotta be Captain America: Brave New World. Not only that, but this has gotta be one of the worst outings the MCU has had, period. It really feels like an indicator that Marvel has no real passion or investment in these characters, as it forgoes trying to build up the next heads of the Avengers in favor of playing to the past, hoping you recognizing things will be enough to make you care about one of the new faces of the franchise. And it's so silly how seriously it takes itself as a political thriller when there's actually nothing even remotely political about it. At least The Winter Soldier had the tiniest dash of commentary on government surveillance. It's nothing all that brave, but it feels radical compared to what we got here. They really did Sam Wilson dirty here by not giving him anything remotely interesting to do here as a character. It's just hero versus government conspiracy, and it never goes any deeper than that. At the end of the day, it just comes off as smashing action figures together through the barest of narratives, with only a few moments of action coming close to covering the price of admission. Like I've said, it may be called Brave New World, but it's filled with the same old shit that I've disliked about Marvel for a while now. Hollywood won't stop until every last beloved franchise is sucked dry and left as a husk of its former self. The problem is that Jurassic Park kinda already had that happen to it years ago, and now Universal is just trying to stomp whatever juice is left in this decayed corpse. Yeah, Jurassic World annoyed me with just how unoriginal and boring it managed to make an island of dinosaurs. If you've seen one, you've seen this one, as it brings no new ideas to the table, scrapping the dinosaurs and civilization idea established in the prior trilogy, because then that would have required actual effort and creativity. Instead, the film decides to return to yet another island with yet another batch of uninteresting characters, which does a whole lot of nothing to move this franchise forward. Sure, the visuals can look great and Gareth Edwards understands scale, but this just isn't enough anymore. We've seen it, and now we're supposed to just be happy with playing the hits? Sorry, not for me. There is just so much potential in these movies, and I don't understand why these filmmakers won't try something different. Instead of a rebirth, this thing should have had a clothes hanger taken to it before it ever saw the light of day. I feel bad whenever a smaller film ends up on these lists because oftentimes they get the benefit of a doubt for not having big studio money behind it. But Grafted actually reeled me in at first, only to become skin-peelingly unbearable as it went on. Talk about a film that worked overtime to really lose any goodwill I had for it from the beginning. I enjoyed it at first because of its cheesy, kitschy, B-movie silliness, but it eventually throws sense out the window while also weirdly feeling like it was taking itself too seriously. I think the film makes a big narrative decision that just doesn't work given the budget, but if the film were to have really doubled down on its absurdity, it probably could have worked. The idea of walking around in someone else's skin is rife for commentary and parallels to be drawn, but this just doesn't have the narrative muscles to utilize the concept to the fullest potential. The effects are pretty solid, but a lot of the performances can be downright bad at times, and not in a super endearing or memorable way. It hurts me to put a genre film like this so low, and maybe others will see something I didn't, but it annoyed me far more than it entertained me.
Where's the rest of you?
It has been really tricky to navigate the landmines of talking about this film because, yes, it is bad. But you know, for actual filmmaking reasons, not stupid culture war bullshit. The movie is Snow White, a film people touted as the death of Disney and wokeness run wild, when really it's just another uninspired live-action remake. Maybe this thing would have been treated the same as the Lilo and Stitch remake if it didn't have all this controversy behind it, but that wouldn't exactly have made it any better of a movie. In fact, it's perhaps the worst live-action Disney film to date. With all the room to take this simple, straightforward story of Snow White and expand upon it, this film does nothing memorable or interesting enough to justify its existence. Rachel Zegler, for all the crap she's received from this film, is honestly fine. She lands the singing and does what she can with the script, which certainly does her no favors. Gal Gadot, on the other hand, is actually terrible. She looks the part, but never manages to be menacing or have a commanding screen presence throughout. The dwarves are rubbery nightmares that are an eyesore to look at and always feel so far removed from whatever setting they're in. It's unfortunate that the only things that beg to be remembered are the bad bits, because the rest of the film, from its flat themes about fighting oppression to the clashing and unmemorable original songs, refuse to leave an imprint in your mind. It's certainly a film that deserves to be disliked, but good God, can we detest it for its actual merits rather than whatever the latest social media shitstorm is?
No.
Robot, oh my gosh!
Yeah, this film was basically me putting my hand back on the hot stove after already burning my hand once. Well, several times if you count all the bad Blumhouse movies I've had to endure. But I truthfully wanted to like Five Nights at Freddy's 2, as I do think there's something cool in there to bring to the big screen. But this was not only as much of a letdown as the first, it's potentially even worse. I couldn't even begin to have the highest of hopes for this based on my lukewarm reception to the first, but I still held out hope that the filmmakers would recognize the weaknesses of the prior film and find ways to work around them in order to make something that could resemble a good movie rather than just a collection of scenes that will appease fans. If you're at this part of the list, you can probably guess which option they went with. It's aggressively unscary, with writing that feels like placeholder text and flat characters that don't get any worthwhile development or arcs. The final product seems convinced good writing and genuine scares are not what the average Five Nights at Freddy's fan is looking for. And you know what? Maybe they're right. Maybe this is only meant to be an hour or so of fan service rather than an actual movie, but that doesn't stop this from being a lowly example of Blumhouse horror that does the bare minimum to get by without remotely trying to be scary, unnerving, or entertaining. The cool animatronics are the worm on the hook, but trust me, it's not worth taking the bait on this one.
Shut the fuck up! Shut up!
Weekend. Buddy, it's like you're trying to make it impossible for me to root for you. I'm a big fan of his music and the way he's been able to craft interesting aesthetics and narratives through them, but his outings on screen have had me seriously questioning what he's capable of. The Idol was an embarrassing mess, but Abel knew in his heart of hearts that he could make something just as, if not much worse. Hurry Up Tomorrow, the companion film for the album of the same name, is just that. It's an incredibly vapid, uncritical psychological thriller that tries to convince you that the music star is being dissected and his soul is being laid bare, but that's far from the truth. From the way it flows to the way it's shot, it comes off incredibly vain and pretentious while forgetting to add some actual worthwhile reflection to justify its self-centeredness. There's no true vulnerability here, despite all the crying and whining The Weeknd does in this film. Other stars like Barry Keoghan and Jenna Ortega are fumbled and misused, only hurting their own stocks rather than managing to be the one good thing about this film. Sure, it can be visually interesting and audibly off-putting at times, but when it's at the service of nothing, I'm not going to be unnerved, I'm going to be pissed off. This album was in my top 5 on Spotify Wrapped, but this movie lands damn near close to being the worst film I saw this year. Not the worst, though. No, that distinction lies with a film I knew within the first 15 minutes of watching it that it was going to be at the very bottom of my list. And in all the years I've been doing this, there has been perhaps no film more fitting for the last spot on this list. Buckle up, because it is a doozy.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for.
When you hear a movie is terrible, you think that could mean a few things. Maybe it's boring, underdeveloped, poorly executed, a complete waste of time. It's very rare that a film fulfills all of those sentiments, but every once in a while, you're graced with a real triple crown stinker. One that is not only bad, but potentially had all the tools and resources it needed to make something at least passable, yet still tripped right out of the gate and continued to haphazardly stumble all the way to the finish line. There is no film that embodies that sentiment more than 2025's War of the Worlds. I'm not trying to over-exaggerate. Nothing about this film works. Every actor feels like it's either their first time being on camera or doesn't even want to attempt to make any of the nonsense in the script work. Each line of dialogue is more painful than the last, failing to establish any meaningful emotion, comedy, or proof that this wasn't actually written by aliens. Setting the entire film over video calls while still trying to be big and bombastic was a dead-on-arrival concept, as nowhere in this film does the structure feel like it ever adds anything of note to the tension or storytelling. I genuinely don't think I've ever watched a film where I can see a poorly keyed out ring of color around the special effect assets multiple times. I've seen straight to DVD movies with better quality control than this thing. Amazon product placement. Not just product placement, but being the key to saving the world product placement. Someone's going to hell for that. There is nothing intentionally redeeming about this movie. Not one single solitary thing that made me go, well, at least the film had that. This film is unequivocally, uncontestably one of the worst films not only of this year, but of the last decade. Hell, maybe even of the modern era. And I had a great time watching it. It is truly a car crash that you need to see to believe. I was pulling out my hair because of how maddening this film got, but I also found myself laughing a ton at the sheer incompetence on display here. How in the holy hell Amazon and Universal Pictures ever allowed this to be released in this state is beyond me. But there is a very tiny part of me that is glad they did. I've said time and time again that a movie getting made is a genuine miracle, as there are so many hurdles and roadblocks you have to maneuver around just to get off the ground, and anyone that's able to make it happen forever earns my respect. But oh, does the length of my respect get tested. And while War of the Worlds may have only warranted the same respect you give to your turds, it still gave me a fun watch, so I have to thank it for that. And that is that, my worst movies of 2025. Don't worry, we will soon be flushing out all of this negativity by talking about twice as many great movies in my best of 2025 film video, so be on the lookout for that. I'll add a link to it in the description once that's out, so be sure to check that out. Also look for a link to my website, martinishot.blog, to find a complete list of all of the movies I saw this year to see how they ranked against one another. But until then, if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. This really helps the channel grow, especially in the new age of YouTube algorithms. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.